Welcome, Dungeon Plunger Union members. I have my +1 plunger, a cup of coffee flavored holy water, and a very special Union member with me today to help plunge the dungeon and flush evil down the drain. Our guest today, if you haven't guessed by the title already, is the director of games at Paizo, creator of Pathfinder and the publisher of Minotaur Games. Welcome to the show, Jason Bulmahn.
Well, I'm glad to be here. It's exciting. I didn't know this was a union shop. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yes, everybody needs to be unionized. We have a strict policy. We're we've been 0 days so far without a death by mimic.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, you got to have those safety standards.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thrilled to have you on the show, and ostensibly you're here to talk about your upcoming backer kit, Hellfinder, the new Pathfinder 2 powered game. But
Yeah.
before we get there, I definitely want to like dig in a little bit to your history and, kind of go through who is Jason Bulmahn.
Boy, I sure hope we can figure that out because I'm not sure I know most days. Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk about the long road I took, getting from there to here. So,
Excellent.
yeah,
So you grew up in Milwaukee during the 80s.
yeah.
Um, And I was kind of curious as like how did that guide you to where you are now? And did you have any idea that D&D would lead to a career in creating games and arguably one of the few that would dethrone D&D for a period of time?
Uh, you know, uh, Milwaukee in the 80s was a pretty special place. Gen Con was in Milwaukee. The very first game convention I ever went to was Gen Con. My dad dropped me off there in 1987. I was entirely too young to be left at a convention by myself, but my dad was like, "I'll see you at 8," and took off. Uh, in retrospect, I'm like, I'm not sure that's a great parenting call, but ultimately, I look back and I'm like, that's one of the first steps that I took to kind of enter this industry. I'd started playing, a year or two before that. A friend of mine taught me how to play in middle school, and I immediately latched onto the game. I had the Mensa red box, and really fell deeply in love with role playing games. At the time, though, it was just games, right? I was playing a lot of D&D, and then I got into high school and joined an actual full-fledged game group. And boy, I think the first game I played that wasn't D&D was Mech Warrior. And then we moved around. We played Vampire, we played Shadowrun, we played Amber, we played Aliens, we played Battlelords of the 23rd Century. We played a lot of games back in those days. And that kind of dominated all of high school. But even then, I, didn't really consider it a career option. I wish I had, to be honest. There was a fair number of people that I learned later just kind of left high school and drove to Lake Geneva and hung out around TSR until they started paying them. And I could have done that, right? I literally could have been a part of that wave. I just didn't. That never entered into my calculus. And mind you, by the time I graduated high school, TSR was literally coming undone. This was the mid 90s and TSR was basically falling to pieces. So, I went from that and went into college for God, first engineering for a year, and then realized that was too much math and settled on architecture because in high school I'd focused a lot on art. I went to a specialty art high school in Milwaukee, and so I mastered in like drawing and sculpting. And I got to college and I was like, well, I can't do that. Nobody can make a living off that. I wanted to be a comic book artist originally.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and I just was like, I got disillusioned with that. I didn't feel like I was good enough because frankly, I wasn't. I was too busy playing games instead of practicing, drawing superheroes. And so I was like, you know what? I need to get a serious job. And like, I like math. So engineering it was. But after a year of that, I was like, no, that's too much math. So I found a kind of blend of art and math, and settled in architecture, which I was pretty happy doing for, you know, uh, throughout college. I got my first architectural job while I was still in college, kind of a part-time gig. And then I worked for several years in an office in Milwaukee working on a lot of different projects. As a matter of fact, I helped design some aspects of the Brewers Stadium. I did a lot of the modeling for one of the entire concourses of the airport. I redesigned a classic bar that's attached to the Paps Theater in downtown Milwaukee. I had a lot of really good projects. And then I got an offer to work in gaming, and it was like, bye.
Wow. So you've like literally changed the face of Milwaukee in some respect.
I I don't want to overplay my part. I was a junior architectural assistant. I didn't have my license yet. I was a part of projects. When I say I worked on the stadium, I did a lot of, kind of structural diagrams and drawings and worked on an awful lot of toilets. Right? Why? Because when you're a junior in architecture, you work on toilets.
We here at the Dungeon Plunger podcast respect the toilet people.
That's
Uh,
right. It's a it's a critical job. It's just very rote because you have to follow very specific diagrams about turning radiuses and, floor clearance and, ADA compliance and it I could go on, but that's not what this podcast is about. It wasn't all toilets, but
okay.
it was a lot of toilets. And one of the big projects I ended up having was I was working on a project renovating homes. This was like a multi-year project, renovating homes around the airport to give them new windows, doors, and chimney flues and stuff to make their homes more soundproof because the airport had gotten very noisy as planes got bigger. And the people around the airport sued and said, hey, you're violating noise statute. And the airport had to settle by basically renovating thousands of homes. And we got the architectural component of that license, but it was very rote work. And trust me, this story is going somewhere. It was very rote work. And I'm working in CAD, and the houses around the airport came in like 10 different configurations, right? Because houses are pretty similar. And especially when they're in large subdivisions. So like I would get an entire day to draw 4 houses. But after a month of doing it, it wouldn't take me a whole day because I already had the plans from identical houses that was next door. So I ended up using a lot of my free time because I wasn't given more than 4 to do in a day. Uh, I would end up using my free time to work on modules for Living Greyhawk.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I got a lot of time doing additional Greyhawk development. The parallel track to all of this is that after high school into college, I kind of fell out of role playing games for a while in late high school and early college because I felt deeply into Magic,
Mm,
um,
I definitely
like
want to talk about
hard.
that.
Yeah, happy to circle back around to that. But I kind of fell out of that for a while. And then as I kind of dropped out of Magic, I went back into the RPGA.
Okay.
And I started doing a lot of volunteering. I would run events. And when Living Greyhawk started in 2000, back in 1999, I mean, actually, it started in 98, is when they started talking about, hey, we want to do a Living Greyhawk campaign. If you're interested in helping us run it, let us know. And I applied for a job that was called, I applied for a job on the Circle of Eight. And I don't think there were actually 8 members, but that's beside the point. And that was the campaign administrators. And I didn't get hired for that job. This arrogant jerk named Eric Mona didn't hire me for that job. He instead, because he worked at Wizards of the Coast at the time, he instead hired me to be a triad member, which was more of a regional administrator for Wisconsin. Um, so that I ended up being able to do a lot of my Living Greyhawk work, kind of, alongside my architectural work because I just had busy work to do. So, yeah, that's how all of that kind of ties together. That's how I
Wow.
met Eric,
That's fascinating.
who 4 years later would give me a call and offer me a job at Paizo. So that's kind of how that all comes full circle.
Going back quickly to Magic, because I'd be remiss to not talk about it. As a huge Magic fan myself, I play Commander now, but you talked about you were playing competitively back in the early days of the hobby. So, what was that like?
It was wild. I mean, so I picked up, I was at Gen Con the year that Magic released. And I really didn't even get a chance to see their booth. It was swamped throughout most of the show. And as if you've ever heard the legend of that release year, they sold out like on Friday
Oh, wow.
or Thursday and had nothing left in stock, and then rush shipped entire pallets to the show that showed up like on Sunday or Saturday. And so like for a day and a half, their booth was just empty and they were just sitting there. And then for the last day of the show, they were swamped again. So that Sunday, I had gotten up early and was playing in a BattleTech tournament specifically. I remember playing in a BattleTech tournament. And the tournament, nobody realized that it was a 2-slot tournament. So like half the people bowed out halfway through because they thought it was a 1-slot tournament. And they would just give their lances to other players. So by the end of it, I was controlling like a third of the battlefield. And well, suffice to say, that allowed me to just focus fire and wipe out my opponents hard. I mean, as it turns out, when you have 16 mechs under your control and half of them are really good at headshots, you're going to win. So I did really well. And back then, Gen Con would give you winning gift certificates. So I had like a $10 gift certificate. And the dealer hall was going to close in like an hour. So I went over to the dealer hall with this $10 winner gift certificate, and I was like, I need to spend this. And I saw a booth that was absolutely packed, and I had no idea what was going on. I had been playing games the entire convention, as I was often wont to do in the mid 90s. And I was like, what the hell is that? And I wandered up to this little booth called Wizards of the Coast and bought an alpha deck and a couple alpha boosters.
Wow.
And on the bus ride home, I cracked them open and just immediately fell in love with the game. I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. And it wouldn't be until a few weeks later when I went back to high school, this was my senior year of high school, um, that I met a friend of mine who also got some at the show. And that entire year, that entire year, we played Magic at lunch all the time. And our local card shop started carrying boosters. And I remember the first time I walked into a card shop and they were actually selling singles.
Mm.
I remember staring aghast at the concept of a Black Lotus for $5.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy to
I
think
was
about that.
mad about it. Me and my friend literally talked about it. It was like, the booster pack's only like 2. Why would I pay 5 for one card? So I fell deep into Magic. I bought a lot of Magic. At one point in time, I had 2 complete beta sets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had 2 complete beta sets. I had 4 Arabian Nights sets at one
Oh
point in
my
time.
gosh. That's amazing.
I had all of Antiquities. I never got all of Legends because of the AB booster problem.
Okay.
Um, Legends, they had some sorting problem, and half the country got boxes with A boosters, and half the country got boxes with B boosters, and you couldn't get a complete set unless you got some from both. So I never had a complete set of Legends. I did have every black card in print all the way up through Urza's Saga at one point in time. Um, so I played a lot. And that following year, at Gen Con, I just bought a ticket to the World Championship. Like I literally just signed up. There wasn't qualifiers. You could just go.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I think it was a field of like 256 or something like that. There was a lot of people. Um, but it was Swiss, round robin, and this was my first big tournament environment, was a World Championship. I think it was the second one. I think they had one at the previous Gen Con. And mind you, this might be 2 years later. I may be mixing up my dates. I'm getting old. But I know it was the second World Championship, and I'm not sure if it was the third year of Magic or the second. I don't remember. But I got to the tournament, and I had I remember Legends was out, so this must have been year 3, actually. Because at this point in time, there were basic rules about deck construction, but there wasn't a lot of banned cards except for the anti cards and stuff. But there was like limits of like, well, you can only have one Black Lotus in your deck. Let's
Okay.
not get too crazy. Um, so I showed up with a red blue monster that was a counterspell burn deck that could, fork Berserk a Juggernaut on turn 2 and deal 20, right? And the deck was just a behemoth. These days, that deck could buy you a house. Like it had the full Power 9 suite in it. It had everything. And I could have won everything. I was playing through in at the at the beginning of day 2 because it was a multi-day tournament. At the beginning of day 2, they were calling out the pairings because they would announce the pairings. And they get to the end of the list and I haven't been called yet. And they're like, and our final match facing U.S. champion Mark Justice, Jason Bulmahn.
Oh
And I'm
my
like,
gosh.
what? I smoked him and sent him home. I had a really good deck. I made it all the way to the top 8, but got eliminated by the only land destruction deck that was still left in the tournament. That was the only deck I didn't want to face because my deck was entirely dual lands and very land. I couldn't overcome land destruction easily. I was good against every other deck type. Weenie, all big red, big counterspell. I had tools for everything, and the deck was so fast. But I couldn't handle land destruction. It screwed up my curve and a bad draw, and that was it. So I had a really good time. I did also attend the first Pro Tour. I went to New York for the first Pro Tour. That was a lot of fun. That was the first time I'd ever been in New York, and it was a blizzard. It was a good time. I was also a Wisconsin state champion for sealed.
Oh wow.
I never won any huge tournaments. Like, I mean, I was the Wisconsin state champion for a bit.
Okay.
I did well. I was ranked in the top 10 of the duelist convocation for a little while.
Oh neat.
I still have my duelist card around here somewhere. It's got a 4-digit number on it, which always makes people laugh. It's handwritten.
Oh my gosh. That's
So yeah,
crazy.
but I ended up dropping out around Urza's
Okay.
is when I finally just was I was a poor, college kid at this point. I was like, I can't afford to keep up. I just can't. I'm done. I'm done for now. I get pulled back in every few years. I'll buy a
Okay.
booster box or two, but I sold all my cards. To my great shame, I traded an entire set of Arabian Nights for an entire set of Jihad cards, the vampire card game.
Yeah, I
I
remember
traded a
that.
whole set for that.
You know,
Woo!
you never know, right? It could have been worth something, but
I,
yeah,
I sold a beta set to buy a car at
I
one
mean,
point,
that's a
but
good
I
deal.
still wish I would have kept it.
That's true. I mean, I did something similar. I had a bunch of really old cards and I sold them for like nothing. And now that I play Commander, I really regret it. But I could totally get the feeling. So kind of going back to with the Living Greyhawk and all that, what was your connection to Greyhawk?
Well, when I first started playing, I played a bunch of the classic Greyhawk modules, right? And had always had a strong familiarity with the world of Greyhawk. Um, I would say that most of our game groups either took place in a homebrew original world, Greyhawk, or Forgotten Realms. Those were kind of the 3 worlds we played in. Um, but Greyhawk was always kind of the classic world we played in. And when the RPGA started the Living City campaign, that was their first living campaign where you made your own character and brought it to the event, and that character was persistent. You would play it to the next session, and the next session, the next session. And so it was really popular, but I kind of got in late on that. I didn't get back into the RPGA until the Living City was well underway. So I was always kind of behind the curve. And when Living Greyhawk started, I was already volunteering for the RPGA all the time. I spent a long number of years just being a player, and back then the RPGA had like table scoring, and you could win like best player of the convention. The only trophies I've ever won in my life, I have like 8 or 9 best player of Gen Con, Best Player of Origins, Best Player of Winter Fantasy trophies. Those are the only trophies I own. And I'd done a lot of that, and eventually, you do that, you get to know enough of the campaign folks, the administrators and stuff, and eventually you're like, hey, I'll pitch in next time. So I'd started doing, I was running games and stuff, and then Living Greyhawk got announced, and I was like, that's it. I can get in on the ground floor and help make this campaign be what I want. And, like I said, I'd always had a strong tie to Greyhawk, so I was pretty excited about it. I actually didn't know a lot about High Folk, the region I ended up running when we first started, but I was a quick study and I had the books. So, I always liked I use the evil, that's for sure. So, yeah, villains are always my jam. So, I was really excited to do that. And, I served as a member of the Wisconsin Triad for boy. We started technically in 99 and I was a triad member till about 2002 when some turnover opened up a spot on the circle and I applied. And at that point in time I got accepted. And so I graduated up and the circle were actually contracted employees.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
well, it was a lot of work. I mean, you had to approve a mountain of modules. You didn't get paid much, but it did mean that I started getting all my flights to shows for free and hotels for free. And I even got sent to Australia for free. All of this was because as a circle member, I was given a number of regions to oversee, including, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana. I also had Texas and Oklahoma because they were close to where we were in world. And I also had Australia. Um, so I got flown down to Australia. That was a lot of fun. Met the Australian Greyhawk players and um, so yeah, I was kind of running what was called the IU's meta region, which was IU's and all the nations kind of threatened by the evil one. And so yeah, I kind of did that for several years, and I helped run a lot of the special events and special storylines. I helped convert Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil for Living Greyhawk, and wrote all the kind of campaign rules to make that work. I remember when that adventure was just about to come out, um, it was at Winter Fantasy, and I was super excited because I was finally going to get to meet Monty Cook.
Nice.
I had not met him at this point, and right when the event first opened, and all of us GMs were in a back area waiting to do this, I had made custom T-shirts for all of us that said balling up in the corner and crying is a full round action that provokes an attack of opportunity. Um, and we all came marching in with our battle mats slung over our shoulders like rifles, chanting, was it? I think it was six-person table, so I think it was six men enter, no men leave. And we just
Nice.
marched in chanting that to collect our tables. We had fun.
That sounds awesome.
Intimidating people was always a good time. I tried to bring something special to the table. Um, but I had a blast with Living Ground. It's a lot of work. But it was a lot of fun.
How much leeway did you have with the story and stuff, like in terms of, I guess, canon? And was there a lot of pushback from like Greyhawk fans?
Not really. We did some things that definitely never made it to actual canon. Um, some of the things kind of did, other things were just kind of swept away and forgotten, and that's fine. Um, so how canon was the campaign? Mixed. I mean, I blew up the Nation of Ten entirely. Like I had it be eaten by ethereal monstrosities that kind of invaded our world like Starship Trooper aliens. Um, so we did kind of the ether threat plot arc, things like that never made it. We definitely, we played around with some stuff. We had very free reign. Wizards of the Coast really didn't at that point in time, Wizards of the Coast didn't consider Greyhawk anything that they really frankly cared about. We were
Really?
allowed to do whatever we wanted. They didn't really care. They were focused so much more on Forgotten Realms and stuff at that point in time and Eberron that what we did with Greyhawk was kind of they didn't They didn't have that much oversight. We ran plots up the flagpole, and they went, "Oh, okay." That was it. I believe at that point in time, by the time that happened, Eric had left Wizards of the Coast as they had spun off their magazine department, which is what he was actually working on. Was he because he was working on Polyhedron as an aspect of the RPGA. And when Wizards decided they wanted to divest themselves of magazine publishing, that's how Paizo got formed, by them creating a company to publish the magazines that Wizards was letting go of. So Eric went with them, and that left the campaign in the hands of someone who got promoted to manage it, and that was Stephen Radney McFarlane.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So Stephen was running it on the inside, and he had a very loose hand when it came to Greyhawk. He was like, "Yeah, that's fine." I had input and thoughts and stuff. I don't want to say that he didn't, but I think we were allowed to kind of do what we wanted for the most part. It may be more strict than that. That's what I remember, but it's been over 20 years now. So, um, yeah, and I did that until the great change happened, which was, in '04 there was a job opening at Wizards of the Coast that I applied for. Um, and at this point in time, I was still drawing houses, right? That's what I was doing all the time. And there was still like 2 years left on the project. I was just bored. I didn't want to really do it anymore. And, I'd been gaming and volunteering, and I actually got some writing assignments and was starting to be able, like my first published adventure in Dungeon had been accepted and was on its way through. It was a Living Greyhawk adventure, or Living Greyhawk compatible adventure, called the
Was it Mad God's Key?
Mad God's Key. Yeah, yeah, Mad God's Key was my first published work.
I love that one.
And so I applied for an open developer position on the D&D team and made it through all the opening rounds, got flown out for an in-person interview. And that was my first time I had ever visited Seattle. And I did the interview. I felt pretty good about it. I spent some time hanging out with Steven. I spent some time hanging out with Eric Mona. I visited Paizo. And at that point in time, Paizo's office was in this little office building, and they put me to work sorting through the slush pile looking for anything cool, like right away. I was just like, well, we got 2 hours before we can go. So you want to go through the slush pile? And I was like, sure. Um, so did some of that, and then flew home, and yeah, a few weeks later I learned I didn't get the job. I
Mm.
was the second candidate. So they hired somebody else.
Do you know who that was?
Yeah, it was Steven Schubert, is who they hired at that point in time. He's just a better fit. And but also during that hiring wave, they hired back a few people from Paizo. So Paizo had spun off, and about 2 years later, they hired back one or two people. Um, and so Paizo had some openings, and including Matt Cernit had left. And Matt worked on Dragon. So I went home. I was pretty dejected. I started getting, however, they gave me a consolation prize and were like, "Hey, yeah, you want to start writing books for us?" And I was like, "Yes, I'd like to write books." So I started writing, my first book assignment was Secrets of Zendrick for Eberron.
Oh, wow.
But I started writing, stuff. I did work on a monster manual. Obviously I wrote a part of Elder Evils. I wrote a third of Expedition to Castle Greyhawk. So I worked on some hardcovers for them. Um, some of this stuff was a little later, but um, in that same hiring wave, Dragon had some openings, and Eric basically called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to work on Dragon? I know you didn't get the job at Wizards. I also know that you were number two, so you definitely know your stuff, at least about the game. And we really need somebody on the Dragon team who's an expert on third edition and 3.5." So I got offered the job and pretty much was like, yes. And literally 3 weeks later, I was on the road, driving out to Seattle to start at Dragon Magazine.
That's incredible. It's I can only imagine how it must felt to have left a safe so-called safe career, a kind of normal career path, and then move halfway across the country to start a whole new career and a whole new life.
At the time, I was terrified. I mean, first of all, I was taking like a pay cut, right? I mean, I wasn't making as much money and moving to a city that was more expensive. Um, and I didn't know what future I would have. All I knew is that if I didn't take that leap, I would regret it for probably the rest of my life. As it turns out, it was actually the safer route to go. Um,
Interesting.
the firm that I worked for went out of business a few years later during the housing crisis, or rather, they greatly shrunk, and I probably would have been laid off. Because they were doing a bunch of housing work, but like that housing crisis dried up all architectural work across the board. So like a lot of firms just shed headcount like nobody's business. So I probably would have lost my job. Um, so gaming actually ended up being a safer harbor for me, especially in the long term. I in those early days I didn't know, right? I mean, I think, I was at Paizo for maybe 2 months when Undefeated and Star Wars Insider, two other magazines that Paizo had at that point in time, were shuttered. Amazing Stories, Undefeated. Star Wars Insider was actually gone before I got there, but Undefeated and Amazing Stories were both closed out. Um, 2 months after I arrived, I remember going into Eric's office and being like, "Should I go home?" Like I hadn't moved all my stuff yet. Like
Right.
I was out there trying to find a place to live. I was living
Okay.
in a studio, and um, I was just like, should I go home? And he's like, no, no, no. The Dragon and Dungeon are doing great. It's just those two weren't. And
Okay.
so uh yeah. I my entire history in the gaming industry could have went so many different ways at so many points. It's kind of shocking that I've managed to get to where I am because yeah, a lot of stuff could have gone down. Wizards could have hired me.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's fascinating that like eventually you're going to design what becomes Pathfinder. So I'm kind of curious about um obviously when you had to make the transition from going from 3.5 to making Pathfinder, there was a certain amount of like holy cows, sacred cows
Yeah.
that needed to be preserved, right? I think
Yeah.
my impression of the time period was that the people who were happy with 3.5 wanted to stay with that sort of um that system, and so that
Yeah.
when you made Pathfinder you were sort of fixing problems with the system.
It was a very weird time for Paizo. Um, we had, at that point in time, we had lost the magazine licenses. They had decided to not renew our license for those because they wanted to take them online. And so we had launched the Pathfinder Adventure Path. And the people who made the Pathfinder Adventure Path happen were primarily the people working on Dungeon because it was an adventure thing, and that's what their skill set was good for. And the end result is, I ended up working on mostly game mastery products and modules. So I was kind of shepherding all the little things we were trying at that point in time: item cards, um, you know, uh, uh, map packs, complete encounters, minis, things, just all these weird little accessories. That's when the critical hit deck was first made. It was originally a
Interesting.
3.5
Okay.
product. And like, we I was working on all those things, but frankly, I wasn't particularly happy. I felt like I was working on these little things that nobody was really paying much attention to, and the Pathfinder Adventure Paths were doing really well. And I was happy that they were doing well. It's just I wasn't doing them. I was doing my other thing. And I was writing a bunch and stuff like that. And at this point in time, Wizards of the Coast tried to hire me. Um, they came knocking and said, "Hey, we have an open position that you should apply for." In particular, I was called up and said, "Hey, we have a position that you should apply for." Normally, that's code for you're a shoo-in for this.
Okay.
So I did it. I applied and I made it through the resume process and then the test and then the phone interview and then the in-person interview. And I got to the in-person interview, and mind you, this was a job all about being a developer again. Maybe a designer, but neither here nor there. And I got to the in-person interview and they asked me a whole bunch of questions about miniature sculpting.
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, what? What? And I found out later that they had lost someone who was working on their miniatures line and they needed to replace them immediately. So they kind of shifted the job description that I was applying to be about miniatures, and they had a different candidate that was good at that. So I didn't get the job. Again, I was second. So the day I found out about that, it was probably one of the lowest days of my career. I think I was not happy doing, little modules that were selling 1,000 copies, and they were selling more than that, but not much. And little accessories and stuff. It just wasn't very fulfilling work. It felt like I was just kind of dinking and dunking. And then Wizards basically roped me in with a promise of a job and then went, ah, no, and Lucy with the football away. Uh, and I was left just kind of at my bottom. And I was like, and at this point in time, fourth edition had been announced,
Mm-hmm.
but no one had really seen it yet. And I went home that night and I was like, you know what? I need to do something. I need to do something creative. I need to feel like I can do something. And I was like, you know what? They're going to leave 3.5 behind. And there are a bunch of things about this system that I don't like. So I'm going to create a PDF of just fixes. I'm going to patch 3.5 and I'll just release it on, boy, I think drive through was around then. I think so. I was like, I'll sell it. And at least then I can feel like I'm doing game design that I like. So I sat down, I started typing my ideas. I started with a big list and I started playing around with some ideas about, hey, maybe classes shouldn't have any dead levels. And hey, maybe turn undead should work in a way that is intuitive and not ridiculous. And, hey, I don't like this. I don't like that. I want to change this. This doesn't work. And at the end of the night, and there may have been some amount of scotch, I saved the file 3.75. For the next few months, I worked on it just to have something to do. And uh, you know, Paizo was left kind of trying to figure out, hey, how are we going to publish things for fourth edition? Because we haven't seen it yet. Part of their negotiation was like with all the third-party publishers was like, hey, we'll let you see the rules, we'll get you the new terms of the new license, which they were calling the GSL. Um, and but none of it was forthcoming. And the months rolled by and we would keep reaching out to them being like, hey, Gen Con is 9 months away. Gen Con is 8 months away. Gen Con is 7 months away. And in the production schedule, you eventually hit a point where it's like, okay, well, we're approaching the time horizon where if we don't work on the thing that's happening for Gen Con, we're not going to have anything at Gen Con. Or if we do, it's going to be for the previous game system, which is probably pretty bad.
Right.
And then Winter Fantasy happened where there was kind of more of a public unveiling of fourth edition. And I went specifically to see what it was like. Wasn't great. In that I didn't really feel like the fan reaction at the show was very positive toward the game. And we had a big meeting to talk about it. And when I got back, it was just like, what's the deal with this? What are we doing? And I said, boy, I don't know. I don't know how well this game's going to go over. I think there's a lot of people who still want to do 3.5. They're not even showing us the rules. We don't know what the license is. We can't publish for it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And in that meeting, I held up a little document packet that I had with me that was like, hey, we could publish this. It's 3.75. I mean, we'll have to call it something else. So that's where Pathfinder was born. Um, uh, in that I became the lead designer of Pathfinder, responsible for fleshing that out and doing it in a ridiculously compressed time frame. I had weeks to get the first alpha put together and out because we wanted to get documents out immediately, and we knew the best we could do is have a beta at Gen Con. But we wanted people to know that there was an alternative, that there was a different game they could play, that they could extend the life of 3.5 with tuned up rules.
Right.
And we wanted that to happen before fourth edition kind of captured the audience and people just started being like, yeah, this is the game I'm playing now, I guess. And it worked. I mean, here I am. That was the start. Um,
So shifting from that, now we're at second edition. Um, so I was kind of curious because I want to get to the Hellfinder stuff because I like we're I want to respect your time here. Um, do you feel like second edition because now you had an opportunity to make I feel significant changes to the way the game is played. Do you feel like would you have liked to have pushed the game further in a different direction? Or do you feel like you're still kind of held like chained to a certain point about the way the growth of the edition?
I I think every time, honestly, Pathfinder First Edition changed a lot from those first books to the last books. Um, we just realized different design space that existed. Archetypes weren't a thing until the Advanced Player's Guide. Um, so that those first years were us just kind of finding our way and exploring the space of the game that we had kind of now inherited. And the core of the game was fundamentally similar to 3.5. Obviously we changed a lot about classes, we changed some of the core assumptions of how the game worked, but there was still a whole bunch of things that we were, for better or worse, stuck with. The way actions worked, the way the math system scaled. And frankly, this was one of the biggest problems for me as a game designer, was that at higher levels, characters actually got worse at some things. And I'm fine with there being disparities. Like wizards shouldn't be good at fort saves, but a wizard is better at fort saves at first level than they are at 15th level. They're demonstrably worse. Their chance was worse in 3.5. And we inherited that because the math scheme didn't change. So when it came to second edition, it was one of the big design remits that I had for the team at that point in time, because it wasn't just me working alone, desperately trying to get rules put together in lightning pace. For second edition, we had a plan, we had time, and I had a whole team of 4 people to make it happen. And in a turn of events, Stephen Randy McFarlane was at this point in time working for me, not me working for him in the RPGA. So it was a wild couple of years. And with Stephen, Logan, and Mark Seifter, Logan Bonner, who is now the lead designer of Pathfinder, the 4 of us, really kind of sat down and said, what do we want this game to be? What can we change? What can we step away from? What ways can we make this game engine work better? What can we do to refine this? And that's where, 3 actions came from. And we played around with that a lot. At one point in time, you get 4 actions, but you don't get a reaction. You have to save an action if you want to use one between your turns.
Interesting.
There was a lot of different ways we played with things. That's where proficiencies came from, kind of a universal scaling system for the numbers. That way, we were unshackled from the fractional scaling that happened before. But some things we stuck with, right? The idea that classes should not have dead levels. You should always get something meaningful when you go up a level. The idea that archetypes are baked into the game, like in second edition, we realized that we had the opportunity to step away from archetypes that were tied to a specific class because they replaced very specific class features and could instead just base it off feats. Everybody gets feats. So here's more feats that are just different, that do different things. We had a universal currency. So there's a lot of things that we did that I think, in retrospect, you kind of never know how well they're fully going to work until several years go by. But, to this day, I look back at those implementations and I'm like, those were the right call. The game is better for it. Is it the same game? No, it's a different game. But that was intentional, right? We knew that it had to evolve. It had to. I think, if you look back at games that came out in the early aughts, they're, stepping into a world of universal designed mechanics and stuff was a big step from kind of older games where kind of the design mindset was kind of more like it's a bolt together thing of whatever rule you need to make this thing work. This thing rolls high, that thing rolls low. Roll a d12 here, roll a d10 here. There were games that just worked like that. And as a result, the system mastery bar was very high because you
Mm-hmm.
had to know all those rules. And instead, even 3.5 had some of that. It at
Mm-hmm.
least stepped into a universal mechanic, but it still had a lot of exception-based weirdness floating around in there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Well, your will save is calculated different than your fort save. Okay, I guess give me a table. Um,
Right. Hmm.
Whereas when it came to second edition, I was like, I want a unified mechanic. I want a mechanic that works the same if we're talking about armor class, if we're talking about saving throws, if we're talking about attack rolls, if we're talking about skill checks. I want them all to work the same. That way, when I say calculate your stealth skill, you know what's my proficiency, what's my dex, what's my level. That's it. And that's the answer for what's my attack with a bow, what's my proficiency, what's my level, what's my dex. It's the same formula.
Mm. Okay.
You know,
Interesting.
it's an ability score plus level plus proficiency. Now, there can be other modifiers, but the core of it is something that's easy to grok. It lowers the barrier to entry to make it easier for everyone to understand how to play. I can explain how to play Pathfinder Second Edition in 5 minutes. I couldn't necessarily do that with Pathfinder First. I could get close, but
That's interesting because a lot of people would say that Pathfinder is so complicated that it's a high crunch game and
I think I think that is a I think it's perfectly fine for people to think that is true, and I get where they're coming from. I think the thing that gets them is that Pathfinder has a lot of options, but the core mechanic is actually relatively straightforward. The core rules of the game are something that are very easy to teach. But then when you say, hey, a character is made up of a lot of different components, all those components work off the same base math structure, but every level you're going to get feats and spells and things, and you got a wealth of options to choose from. That's why when you look at the beginner box, we shrink all those options down to make an easier play experience. And lo and behold, everybody's like, "Oh, I get this game. This game's easy." Because it is at its heart, roll a d20 and add a number. That's it.
let's get to Hellfinder.
Sure.
So you've done a number of projects on your Patreon, which I'm going to have linked in the show notes.
Yeah.
You've done Hope Finder, which I backed.
Yeah.
Uh, Fabulous, little set of for the YouTubers out there. For those of you listening, I'm holding up these really cool looking little books. And then you also did a Pathfinder adventure, even.
I have a setting that I've been working on that's currently on hold. I need more time to feel some things out and work some things out. Um, but I have my own specific world setting for Pathfinder Second Edition called Eventide, um, which is it's a world with a central conceit that magic is dying, and it is a mystery as to why. And that's the central conceit of the story. It's a lot more than that. Um, I'm exploring it through adventures, and I've got a player's guide that's like basically written. I just haven't quite finished it yet. And there's a lot of things I want to do. Frankly, the biggest challenge that I have is just that creating an entire fantasy setting requires a great deal of capital in terms of art and advertising resources and things like that to make it work. It's very hard to get traction with those sorts of things. So right now I'm kind of reconsidering my approach. Um, but I'm still invested in it. I'm still excited. I've actually put out the first adventure set in the world called Wolfram's Fate Part One. It's actually a four-part adventure, but I've only released Part One. Um, so that exists. Hope Finder was a hack of Pathfinder Second Edition. Basically, takes the rules of Pathfinder and changes out some things to turn it into a zombie apocalypse game. I released that as a PDF first, and then did a crowdfunding campaign for the print edition, which you have. Um, these days, you can get it at drive-through, and they also do POD, print on demand of it. But those, I've done some other things too. There's a print on demand card game in there called Elephant in the Room. There's a bunch of other stuff. I I use Minotaur Games as my private imprint. It's when fancy strikes me to do a thing, I do it and I release it under Minotaur Games. It's kind of my own boutique little game company, mostly for fun.
So tell me about Hellfinder. This is coming out. The backer kit is coming out July 16th, 2025. This episode's coming out on the 14th of July. So you'll have a couple of days before it comes out. I'm gonna have a link in the show notes so you can click that and get ready to be notified when it's launching and get in on the bottom floor. So tell me. What is, because this sounds like you talked a little bit off the air and it sounds crazy. So tell me this mad plan.
It's a different sort of thing. So Hellfinder is a modern horror hack of Pathfinder Second Edition. So Hopefinder was a zombie apocalypse hack, set kind of in the future. Um, this one is a modern horror hack of Pathfinder Second Edition, and Hellfinder is set only a few years in the future, and but is otherwise mostly our world. And in Hellfinder, all the player characters are agents working for the Bureau. But you're not special agents flying around the world catching drug kingpins and, you know, international espionage, and you're not having fun. No, you work in the basement of the Bureau. You've
Okay.
All of the player characters are flunkies. They've basically failed at their previous job in the Bureau. So you might have been on SWAT. You may have been a forensic investigator. You may have been, a behavioral analyst. You could have been a special agent. You could have been all those things. But something in your past caused you to get demoted and sent to the basement. And I say this because the story of Hellfinder is central to the gameplay. Unlike Hopefinder, which just kind of said, you're a survivor in a zombie apocalypse. What story do you want to tell? Hellfinder has a very specific story you are asked to play first. And the story is you are this basement dwelling agent. And so you might have had a gambling problem. Sorry, I sold my service pistol to pay off a gambling debt. You maybe have a drug problem. You could have, all sorts of things. You could be, slacking off at the job. You could have really screwed up a case, right? And let a bad guy go free or accidentally killed someone or all sorts of things. But you get reassigned to a this basement desk called the Co-Departmental Land, Equipment, and Assets Network, CLEAN. And down in CLEAN, your job is to go through old files and square up the Bureau's books and look for waste, like wasteful spending, and make sure receipts match up, make sure that the agency isn't getting ripped off, the Bureau isn't getting ripped off. You're basically doing scut work in the basement, but occasionally there's field work for you to do because, there are old offices that need to be cleared out, or maybe they had a safe house that is no longer being used and they want to go pack up all the equipment and close out the lease, return the keys. They need to send somebody to go do that, and you get sent. And the story opens when you and your fellow agents are being sent to the northern woods of Wisconsin, a small town called Oshkosh Falls, to close out a field office that was supposedly shuttered back in 1996 that the Bureau has been paying for ever since. That's where the story begins. And when the story begins, you are told to open up packet number 1. Packet number 1 is a sealed packet of paper, loose paper, 3-hole punched loose paper. And it contains all the rules for character creation. It contains all the rules for the new game systems, which include rules for stress, which kind of work like hit points, but they're mental.
Okay.
And a system for traumas. So whenever you take a critical hit, you can get a physical trauma. And these can be small things like you've sprained your ankle, or you've got a bad bruise, or, you've got a cut that's bleeding. Or they could be serious. You broke your arm, you have internal hemorrhaging, something really bad has happened to you. But you can also have mental traumas as well that can arise from extreme stress. And these can be small things as well, like a moment of panic, forgetfulness, maybe you kind of black out. But they can also manifest in long-term mental traumas. You could develop a phobia, you could develop all sorts of challenges that your character has to kind of overcome and live with. And all of this is there to kind of make the characters more fragile because it is a horror game. And Pathfinder as a rules engine is kind of for heroic fantasy. But it's real easy to tweak those numbers by changing the encounter mechanics and limiting how characters can gain hit points. limiting what they can do to regain health, what they can do to regain stress, and adding in additional long-term penalties. Will, and I've through playtesting, I've already confirmed this, will make the characters far more afraid to get into a fight. You will start
Interesting.
looking for other options. How can we solve this without drawing our guns? Because if we have to draw our guns, things could go bad for us really quick. And if we do, the tension is really high. Because if I get shot, I could die in one hit. One crit could kill me. And I'm at full health. So that's what's in the first packet, along with all the operator material, including the first arc of the story.
So let me just stop you for 1 second. When you say packet, are we saying so like let's say I back this project, which I'm going to, but let's say am I going to get an envelope as part like am I going to get a PDF? Like how does this how is the product itself going to be
So the
like
the core the core of Hellfinder are three dossiers.
okay.
So you will get three shrink wrapped or otherwise plastic sealed packs of paper.
Okay. So like actual physical dossiers with like these
Yeah.
papers.
And each one contains a bunch of hole punched pages. And they're not books because the later dossiers add more material to the previous material. And in some cases, they may even replace old pages with new pages. Some of the pages may have redacted information on them. Some of them may just be, you may be missing pages at the beginning. You'll be like, okay, I have page 1 through 14, and then it jumps to page 18.
Oh wow, okay.
Where's
Mystery.
15, 16, 17? No, they're not in here yet. Um, and so as a result, you're supposed to put these in a three-ring binder. And I mean, obviously, I'm selling a deluxe tier that comes with the binder. If you want to get them for less, you can just buy the packets and you can supply your own binder. They're available pretty much everywhere. It's a three-ring binder.
What are these binders you speak of?
Yeah, exactly. It's a mystery. Um, so that's how the game unveils itself. Is through these packets. And there's a reason why I'm doing this. Not everything is as it seems. Your simple mission in Oshkood Falls, surprise, surprise, involves something far more dark and sinister than just a closed field office. There is something horrific happening here, and you get kind of unwittingly sent into it. I don't want to give any more spoilers than that because I really do want it to be an experience for not just the players, but the GM as well. And I do want to stress that I am selling a game that has sealed packets. The first game will come with kind of a lengthy content warning that is like, hey, this game contains a lot of different themes. You can work to mitigate these, but you should talk about these in advance. It's not a spoiler to say there is body horror that happens later. It may not be right in the forefront right away, but it's something you should know about because I don't want people to get kind of suckered into a game that suddenly contains something they don't want to play with. Now, some things aren't fun for everyone to play with. I understand that. So, the packets are sealed, but I'm going to warn you in advance kind of the general scope of what's here. You won't know the specifics. You don't know how they manifest, but you'll get an idea. But yeah, there's three such packets. There's the clean packet, then there's the packet from Project Beta, or no, the Department of Beta, and then there's the Project Babylon packet, which is the final packet.
That sounds so rad. This is awesome. I'm so excited. This sounds like a real experience. So I do need to ask the question, how much replayability would there be? So as a game master, let's say I run this, would I be able to run it for another group or the same group again?
I'll say this. I keep things hidden from the game master as well, just so that it can be a fun surprise for them as well. But the moment the GM gets the next packet open, they get a whole new chapter revealed to them, right? They get to read all of that right away so that they know how to prepare and plan for it. Because ultimately, I do expect that the GM will at least be able to be like, yes, I can run this again. And largely for the players, it'll still be the same experience. You just have to sort the pages back out and make sure you don't give them what they're not supposed to see yet. Um, I think from the player side of things, the thing you have to understand is that at the end of all of this main story, there is a section that is all about what do we do next? Because that's not the end of the story, that's the end of the introduction. That you now know what is going on in the world and how it is affecting everything and what you might do to further the story, where you go from here. And maybe not those characters, because those characters might be broken beyond repair, but new characters could come in and experience this, right? Those adventures aren't included, but I'm going to provide plenty of guidance about what other adventures there might be. I also plan on, just like with Hopefinder, um, I plan on having a pretty permissive license for this associated with the game that says if you want to publish your own stories set in this world, you have my permission to do so. Um, within certain guidelines and reason, and obviously these will be in no way affiliated with me, so content at your own risk. Um, but just as with Hopefinder, I plan to open up several kind of what would otherwise be protected terms and say, hey, yeah, you can use this. You can use this in your own thing. Um, because I do want to encourage other people to make content. Um, and I'm just one designer, so I have a limited amount of content I can create.
Right. What was the inspiration? Because this seems like a very unique take on the role-playing game and kind of like how to present I guess like a campaign, like a mini campaign, this with this opening part. What what inspired this particular take?
I think so. The campaign as a whole has a lot of inspirations. It draws heavily from the X-Files. Um, it draws from an Apple show called Slow Horses, um, which specifically involves a bunch of MI5 basement dwellers who are mess ups. That's where I like that idea, but I was like, what if that? But also Hellraiser and the X-Files. What if, you know, you worked in the most lowly department, but also realized that there are horrible, nightmarish things dwelling beneath the surface of the everyday world. Um, so in that, it's also, it does draw some inspiration from Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green, Laundry Files, things like that. I think I kind of look at all those. I'm specifically not doing anything kind of Lovecraftian with the story. It's different. Um, but I do like the vibe, right? Especially when, there are certain stories that'll become rather obvious, which ones I think I found interesting. Um, and clearly from all the background imaging I'm using, like the dawn of atomic energy plays some aspect in the story. Um, if for those of you who go check out the campaign page, you'll see a lot of documents spread out through time. Some going back all the way into the like 50s and 60s, some being in the 90s. There's a strange audio recording that's available. Like there's all sorts of weird artifacts that all tie into the general theme of the story. None of them give you a complete picture. And I also plan to include a fair number of kind of cool handouts as part of this story. So when it comes to the inspiration for the game model itself, I I just think I wanted a game where it's always been my experience with role-playing games that when I get the core book, I read the whole thing and now I know what's going on. Right? Like even if I was a player and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to read everything, still peek a little, right? I'd still want to know kind of what the vibe is. And oftentimes the game itself, by its very nature, will give away kind of what it's about pretty heavily very early. And maybe some of the story secrets aren't available, but you still get a good sense of the vibe of the game, the direction of the game. Kind of by the time you're done reading the investigators part of Call of Cthulhu, I mean, you know what it's about. And I kind of wanted to approach this as a game where I'm like, maybe you don't know what this is about. Maybe you are an agent working for the government and you're here to close out a field office. And then you arrive and everything is not what you expected. And you are in a creepy town in the middle of northern Wisconsin, pretty far away from any good cell towers, and looking at each other like, what have we gotten ourselves into? And we have a job to do. Um, and quite soon after that, you realize that there are things and they are moving against you, and it's not good. And the story spins out from there. But I want that to be a new experience. Like I want you to not know what to expect. Because I think that is something that RPGs have a real hard time doing. I and individual adventures can do it just fine, right? You don't know what's going to happen, in the middle of most Call of Cthulhu stories, but you still know the general shape of it. And I'm trying to kind of preserve that mystery. And so to some extent, it's also kind of shaped from like at-home party games, solve a murder mystery game where there are hidden things that aren't revealed to you till later. And I've always been kind of fascinated with those. They offer an interesting play experience that I think goes above and beyond just kind of statistics and rolling dice and stuff. I want the players to actually spend time thinking about what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're going to approach things instead of just it's one more tack to get them to pull back from the mindset of Pathfinder, which is like, well, there's a monster, so I draw my sword, right? I want you to stop and say, I don't know what that thing is, and it's coming toward us, and maybe we should go.
So two questions kind of come up in my mind. So first, as a game master approaching this, my concern would be how easy is it going to be for me to run this if there's like huge parts of it that are like being hidden from me? Like
Sure.
I feel like that's sort of like one of those old old time kind of piece of advice. It's like, okay, you get the book, you read the book, you know the book, and then you're able to run the adventure. What
I
would be your suggestion or your
I let me put it like this. If back in the olden days, back in the 90s, you were running a module series, and the first module was set in a valley, and there were a bunch of villages and some adventure locations, and the story took place there. You would run that adventure, and you wouldn't sweat the details of the fact that adventure 2 takes place underground in a giant cavern underneath this valley. You wouldn't have to worry about the fact that, oh, well, maybe the players might accidentally go there because you don't even know that exists yet.
mm,
And that's okay. Um, and Adventure 3 might take place, on another plane of existence or in the valley next door or in the metropolis 100 miles away. And that's that adventure. So the way I approach this from a story is saying arc 1 of this adventure, the GM will be given all that they need to run arc 1.
right, okay.
Arc 1 has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a satisfying story conclusion that is like, we did this thing, we hit this milestone, and at the end of that, roughly, you hit a point where you trigger packet 2. And when packet 2 is triggered, it happens at the end of a session. Because it's designed to be like, all right, take your pieces, go learn your pieces. Next time we'll start with the new thing. Um, and it basically, you have reached a certain milestone in the story where something new becomes evident. There's the next chapter of this story gets triggered. Um, but it can't happen before the end, really. It because it is the culmination of the first story that gets you there. Um, and that goes with 3 as well. So it is something, there's an entire section for the GM that says, hey, understanding the frame of this. And the GM is given a basic kind of understanding of the shape of the story. Um, just so that they know not to ad lib something that will invalidate the rest, right? I think that's the biggest worry I have,
Right.
is saying this is what is happening. If you have to ad lib, don't go beyond the bounds of this.
Right. Okay.
So, if a lot of the story is dealing with, you know, a belligerent drunk who lives in town, um, and you know, the adventure If that person lives or dies, that's fine. It's that person is not the critical linchpin to the story later. Um, but and if there is any such characters, the GM will be like, this character cannot perish. They are needed for part two. They escape, they get out, right? I'm really trying to avoid any of that because I really do want to give the GM the flexibility to run it how they would. If half the town burns down, half the town burns down. That doesn't mean the story doesn't continue. And part of that's because the second part of the story doesn't require a bunch of the things in town to be there to work. It does some things in different places or with different things. It's hard for me to say without
Right,
giving
right.
anything. But that it's pretty easy to say, yeah, well, there are some things that were never even on your original map because you had no way of knowing they were there. Neither did the GM, so there's no reason you would have went there, right? Um, so yeah, it's not like you're out doing hexploration or anything like that, right? It's generally speaking, we need to go to this place and talk to this person, or we're gonna go and try and get a meal at this country bar. Maybe they'll seat us this time. It's gonna be more like scenes. The adventure format itself is a lot more player driven in its agency. It's a lot less of a railroad or kind of a limited choice tree. It's more like, how do you approach these problems? Because when you first arrive, you have a laundry list of things you need to do, and you immediately run into problems. And you also immediately stumble into a mystery that, frankly, doesn't make any sense. The field office closed in 96, but all of the notes end in 92.
Hmm. Interesting.
Um, so there's just weird things going on from day one. I don't want to give away any more, but the entire point is to draw you in and have you start going, what is actually going on here, and why is any of this happening? So I'm excited. I'm really excited for people to experience it. I'm still in the depths of writing it, to be honest. The crowdfunding campaign is ready to go. I have large chunks of it ready. I have an intro adventure called Half Past that I'm trying to get together a group to run live on my Twitch sometime during the campaign. I need to, it's like, scheduling a game group to get together though is just tough. It's tough even for me. Uh but Half Past is a side story that takes place on the road from DC to Wisconsin. Because you're not given a plane ticket to fly there. You work in the basement. You're given a giant town car and told to drive there.
The town of what was the town called again?
Oshkood Falls.
Okay, is this a real place?
No.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, is this a place where you were like, no, this I know this place. It was weird.
I'll be honest. Growing up in Wisconsin, you quickly learn kind of the naming construction of a lot of the towns and villages in Wisconsin is based off Ojibwe and some other native languages. Um, so I did go to, and many of them are bad French mistranslations of Ojibwe words and phrases. Not all of them. Some are accurate. Some of them are weird modern conglomerates of and I did a lot of research to figure out what to call this place. So Oshkood Falls is very specific in its meaning. I doubt anyone will be able to figure out where I was going with it, but it is explained in one of the packets. Um, uh, but no, it's a fictional location. I will say this. The story of Hellfinder does deeply involve a bunch of real world events and real world places. But the main story and the place that you were adventuring is in a fictional location.
That's this sounds so fantastic. I'm so excited to get my hands on this. Um, so what's the ETA expected for this to be ready to go out to people after?
I think the crowdfunding campaign is happening from July 16th into mid uh, August. It runs for exactly 34 days. Um, an auspicious number. And so it'll be done in mid-August. The game itself is still in design and playtesting. I'm making very good progress on that front, but it's probably going to take me a few months to finish. Then I need to get it through my editor, and get it into layout and get it printed. I think delivery will happen probably in late winter or spring 2026. That would be my guess right now.
Great. All right. So before I let you go, I usually ask everybody this question. The focus of this show is how to become a better GM. What would be one piece of advice that you would give to a novice or a veteran game master?
I would say never be rigid in your story. Never always find a way to say yes and let the player decision and the player choice drive the story forward. You may not have anything planned down the right fork of the road when the players take that instead of left. But it is just as easy to say that whatever was down the left fork is actually down the right fork, because that's where you need the story to go. So my biggest advice is always work with your players to create the story. You don't need to block them. You don't need to force them into your tale. You can let them find their way into your tale and work with them to build that story. You don't have to force it.
Great. So before I let you go, is there anything that I forgot to ask or that you just wanted to throw out there?
No, I mean, I think that's about it. I will say this for folks who are watching this right after release, if you go to the backer kit page before launch, you can reserve your pledge, and basically you throw $2 into the bucket. And if you do that, you will get the half-past intro adventure for $2. And you will get it in either PDF or print, whichever version of the game you get. And if you get both, you'll get it in both. And you won't be charged for it extra. Those are the PDF is $4, the print version is $8. But you can spend $2 right now and possibly get $12 worth of stuff for $2. But that is only good until the start of the campaign. After that, it's an add-on, and you just have to, decide which version you want. So I'll say that's existing. I'm really excited to have this crowdfunding campaign happen. There is a basic version that just gives you the dossiers. There's a PDF version that just gives you the PDFs of the dossiers, and then which you have to print out yourself and then hole punch, right? Um, and then there's a deluxe version that includes a bunch of add-ons like a binder. There's an sheet pad of agent character sheets, agent records. There is a pack of agent folders, which are brown folders that you can write on. And I also include a bunch of stickers that are meant to be achievements that you can put on your folder. So when you get, when you survive a physical trauma, you get a little blood sticker to put on your folder as a record of you lived. Uh, it also includes a dice set, which I'm still working on. And it includes a metal pin designed specifically after the pin worn by some of the cultists in one part of this story. And you can get their metal pin. So it includes all of that, and that's kind of the deluxe version of it. And then there's a super deluxe tier where I will run the intro adventure for you and your group.
Oh my
It's
God.
not cheap, but it does exist.
Um, I forgot to ask. So
Yeah.
it's in full color or it's black and white?
Much of the art is black and white intentionally because it's made to look like old photographs and stuff. Parts of it are in color. There is some color here and there. Some of the documents will be in color, some will be in black and white. It's all over the place.
Okay. And for printing and all that stuff, is that going to be done in the States or do you know what you're doing?
That's a fine question that I am still sorting out. I do have pricing to print the entire thing in the United States, but frankly, it is very expensive to print in the United States. But the tariff situation is also very complex to print in China or anything. So, I'm still working it out. I have a solution that will work if I have to take it. It's just a matter of whether or not I can find something that works a little better. Um, and frankly, printing dice in the US is not easy.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
it,
I'd never
yeah,
really thought about where the dice are made.
they're almost all made in China. Yeah. Not all, but almost all. Again, it just comes down to figuring out what works for the campaign. It's kind of a challenging time to make things right now. We don't know what things are going to be priced week to week. It's not fun.
Yeah, I believe it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on the show, Jason. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it. There was so much more that I wanted to ask you, but I really wanted to get to why I invited you on the show to talk about Hellfinder. This sounds
absolutely.
fantastic. Um, so once again, thank you very much for coming on. And to the rest of you guys out there, plungers up.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.